In today's tutorial, I'm going to show you step by step how to paint this watercolor tree on your iPad. And at the end of this video, I'll give you a few bonus tips on how you can change up the look of the tree without having to repaint it. Hello and welcome to Color with Kendi, where we paint digital watercolor and digital gouache on the iPad in the app Procreate. For this video, you'll need a few supplies, which I have listed in the pinned comment and the description. I'm using an iPad, I'm using the app Procreate, I'm using a pressure-sensitive Apple Pencil, and I'm using custom brushes that give a beautiful watercolor effect. And I'm also using the custom paper texture that comes with the set. I'm using the 8 by 10 inch canvas. And there is also a free traceable that goes along with this video. So if you'd like to download that, you can head to the pinned comment and the description. Before we start painting, let's talk about our game plan. What are you going to learn in this video? You'll learn how to import traceables, and you'll also learn about the selection tool and the copy and paste menu. And then what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the shape method of painting watercolor. And this is not something that is commonly used, but I find this to be a really effective technique for painting watercolor. And we're going to do the top part of the tree with this. And then we're going to talk about how to add more fun watercolor effects to your tree. And we're going to do this with clipping masks. So I'll talk about how to use clipping masks for layering. And then we'll paint the bottom of the tree together, and you will learn how to add some texture and shadow. And finally, we're going to add some details. These details are going to help your tree pop, and we'll talk a little bit about how to create contrast. And then at the very end, we'll talk about some bonus tips, so definitely stick around for that. Now, there is a lot that we're covering in this video, so there are chapters and timestamps, so feel free to skip around. So the first thing we're going to do is import the traceable. If you know how to do that already, you can skip to the next section. So the brush that I'm using today comes with a number of different canvases and different sizes. I'm going to use the 8 by 10 inch canvas with the second texture. And what I'm going to do is swipe to the left and duplicate it. That way I'm not touching the original. I'm going to tap on that, and let me just show you what that texture looks like. It's a little bit of a bumpy texture. The other texture in this brush set is a little bit less bumpy, so you could also use that. So I'm going to zoom out, and this is basically all the brushes from this set and what they look like. I'm going to turn that off because I don't need that for this particular painting. So I'm going to tap right here, right at the very top, because we want to import our traceable at the top. Then I'm going to go to the wrench icon, go to add, and insert a photo or file, depending on where you saved the traceable. I saved it as a photo. So the traceable has been imported. I'm going to zoom out a little bit, and you can tap right here. And what I want to do is move this color palette onto its own layer. That way, what we can do is we can reduce the opacity, make this traceable a little bit lighter so it's not in our way. So let's zoom in. Let's go to the selection tool. That ribbon right there is your selection tool. Make sure you're on freehand. And then with your pencil, you can lasso around it. And now in order to move this to a new layer, let's use the copy and paste menu. To use that, all you need to do is with 3 fingers, swipe down on the screen, and you will get the copy and paste menu. Just tap cut and paste. And what it will do is it will put your color palette on a separate layer. And now we have our traceable right here. To zoom out. And we need to use this traceable just to kind of see where we're going to put our pigment, but we don't need to see it with such a dark line. So just tap on N, and this is where you'll see opacity, and just reduce the opacity. So you can change it to whatever you like. I typically leave it around 20%. It's enough for me to see it, but it's not too dark. But you can make it a little bit higher if you want to be able to see it with ease. And then what we're going to do is just go to the paint here layer. Okay, so now that we've imported the traceable, let's start painting. So in the layers panel, I'm going to paint where it says paint here. So basically paint in a layer that is between the paper background and the texture overlay. And as I mentioned earlier, we're going to use the shape maker method, which means that we're going to create a shape at the top of the tree, and then we're going to add watercolor effects on top of it. So if you go to the brush library, there are a bunch of different shape maker tools. So these are brushes 27 to 29, And depending on your illustration, you may pick one over the other. For today, let's go with Shape Maker A. I like the texture that it has on the side. And basically with this brush, you can create the top of the tree or any shape that you want. You can apply this technique to any of your paintings. Now, typically when I use the shape maker, I will do my shape in black. That's just how I like to do it, but it might look a bit funny to you. So let's just pick this color right here and let's make the shape with green, but we are going to change it later on. So you can use any color you want right now, just a color that you can see easily. Now, when it comes to creating the shape, there are a few ways you can do it. You can just use the outline that you see in this traceable as is, but I find that that's not going to give you the most natural results. Usually when you paint something like a tree with traditional watercolor, what you're going to do is you're just going to use movements like this with your brush to lay down the pigment. And that way you'll have a few gaps between your strokes and it just looks a little bit more natural rather than having a solid shape. So let me just talk a little bit about this brush. With low pressure, it's going to look like that. With heavy pressure, it's going to look like that. And you can vary the pressure within your stroke like this as well. Now, to create this tree, what we're going to do is we're going to just make strokes like this. So you're kind of starting out with heavy pressure, and then you're lifting off the screen, and it becomes a little bit tapered. You see that? If I use the same amount of pressure throughout my stroke, it's going to look like that, but we don't want that. We want it to look more like little leaves. So start off with heavy pressure and then lift your pencil quickly off the screen. It does take some time to get the hang of it, but it's just basically playing with pressure. So we're going to do this kind of stroke throughout the tree, and we're going to do this for the entire top part of the tree. So I'm going to show you how to do that in one section here, and then I'll complete the rest of it on my own and we'll come back. So I'm going to erase that and I'm going to start. So I'm starting to do this. I'm using the traceable as a guide. Do you see I'm leaving those white gaps, and I think that makes it look quite interesting. So just go around and do that for the tree. Whatever looks nice to you. This step does take some time, so just, go with the flow. It's like a meditative experience. Now, if you don't want to do that, then you can definitely just go around the outline of the tree and fill in that outline. So there's different ways to do that. So I'm just going to go around the tree and continue this. Now, you don't need to watch me do the entire tree because it's probably going to take me a minute or two. And what I would recommend is, you see, I have this little thing here, just leave a little gap there. So that's kind of like a gap within the tree. It just makes it look a little bit more interesting. Okay, so I have finished making the shape, and you can definitely do this in your own way. You can have leaves that are slightly different, but the point is to make all of your brush strokes on one layer and in one color, and this becomes your singular shape, and we will apply watercolor effects to this shape. Now, if you try to apply watercolor effects to this, it's not going to look so great because this color here is quite opaque. Watercolor is transparent, it's luminous. So what we're going to do first is convert this entire shape into white and then add watercolor effects. That way you will have a lot more luminosity. So what I'm going to do is go to hue, saturation, and brightness in the adjustments panel and increase the brightness to max. This is an easy way to turn your shape into white. I can't really see it, but that's okay. It's there. It is definitely there. And now what we're going to do is we're going to tap on plus to add another layer, and we're going to make this layer a clipping mask. So now basically anything that I do in this clipping mask layer is only going to show up on the shape underneath. That is the advantage of a clipping mask, and I use this a lot for watercolor. So just tap on this and tap on clipping mask, and you will see what I mean in a second. So we're going to keep the color the same. We're going to go to the brush library, and usually after I make a shape, I like to use brush number 30 or 31 to kind of lay down the base color. I'm going to tap on brush number 30, and what I want to do is go all the way to the top size 100 and in one motion without lifting the pencil, just color in that shape. If I lift the pencil, I will get some overlap, and I'm trying to avoid that. So now, as you see, that shape is still kind of the same color as before. It's got luminosity. It's got a lot more translucency compared to before. So let me just show you what it was before. So this is what it was before. As you see, no luminosity, but now it has luminosity, and we have pockets where it's a little bit darker and pockets where it's a little bit lighter. And this is very subtle. We can add on more watercolor effects to this. So now we have our base layer. And now what I like to do is I like to add effects in different layers. And the reason I do this is if I add all my effects in one layer, if for some reason I don't like a particular effect, or if I don't like the color, I can't change it if it's all on one layer. So I have a new fresh layer here. I'm going to tap on it and make it a clipping mask. And what we're going to do is we're going to grab this color by pressing and holding. And I'm going to go to the brush library. And then I am going to go to the Pigment Bleed Overlay brush, brush number 32. And I'm going to start to add a little bit of pigment wherever I want there to be a little bit of darkness. Now this brush definitely looks different depending on the brush size. So I'm going to go to the mid size first, and let's have a look. So I'm just going to tap. Do you see I'm tapping to get a little bit of pigment? Do you see that's what it's doing? Now I don't want too much pigment in the center. I want it kind of at the edges, and I'm tapping a little bit outside the edges, and you'll see that it's coming in. Just being very gentle with it. Just tapping here and there to add a little bit of variation. And you can add as much or as little as you want, totally up to you. What I also want to do is add a little bit of a yellow tone as well. So I'm going to do that in a new layer. Tap on plus, make it a clipping mask. And what I'm going to do is go to my color menu and go a little bit more towards yellow and bring it up just a touch, make it a little brighter. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in with this hard edge overlay A brush, and I'm going to see if this is a nice color. Maybe it's a little bit on the brown side for me. So I'm going to go up a little bit higher. And I like that. So you can decide what colors you choose, but I kind of like that. So let me just talk about this brush. So I'm going to do this in another layer just so you can see this better. So with this brush, if you apply heavy pressure, that's what it looks like. But then when you start to release the pressure and keep your pencil on the screen, you can erase away some of that pigment. And depending on how much pressure you apply, you can get something like that. And that's really great for adding variation within a shape. So I'm going to go back to that clipping mask. I'm going to go with size 55. I thought that was a bit too small. And I want to start to add a little variation wherever I want it. And use light pressure and heavy pressure, a mix variable. So I'm just going to kind of go wherever I feel like, just so that there is a little bit of variation of color. And I do want this area here to be a little bit more green. So again, I can go into the color wheel and select any color that I like. That's a little bit too green. Let's stay within the range of yellow. Yeah, I kind of like that. Now I could do this in this layer or add another layer. I like to add layers. You don't have to always add layers, but I like to add layers so that I can always change things. And I'm going to go with the smaller brush size. What I'm going to do is these sections here that are close to the branches, I'm going to make them a little bit more green. I'm going to add a little bit more of a dark color towards the bottom, just to indicate that the bottom of the tree has more of a shadow. So I'm going to go in here and make this color a bit darker and add a little bit more color where the light isn't hitting as much. So let's go to another layer, tap on plus, and we'll do the trunk in this layer. So for the base color of the trunk, I'm just going to use this. So press and hold to grab it. And for the trunk, we're not going to use the shape method. We're just going to paint directly. So I am going to pick this one, actually this one. Brush number 16, Tapered Watercolor B. And let me talk a little bit about this brush. So if you use light pressure, it'll look like that. Heavy pressure, like that thicker line. And it has a very sharp taper. So I think for things like branches and things like leaves, it's actually quite nice. And it has some inherent watercolor texture in it that's a little bit stronger. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to paint the trunk without lifting my pencil too many times. Because every single time I lay down pigment and lift my pencil, there will be that overlap. You can definitely smudge it out with the smudger, but I want to avoid smudging as much as possible. So I'm going to, actually, let's start with the bottom of the trunk and then do the branches. So I'm just going to go in here and without lifting the pencil, lay down that pigment. And you don't need to be super precious about it. It makes it look a little bit more hand done. Because the thing with digital is it's very easy to go overboard and make everything look very perfect. So do you see here? Now I'm getting really close. I don't want to have that overlap. So I'm trying to avoid that overlap as much as possible. It's still there. That's okay. We can smudge it out. And for the branches, I want the branches to kind of be thinner towards the end. So the way to do that with this brush is start off with heavy pressure and then kind of release the pressure as you move off the screen. That way you'll be able to get that little taper right there. And I'm also going to add some branches that are peeking out through these little gaps that we have. Remember, we made those gaps. So just have some branches there. And yeah, you can add branches wherever you want. And now what I'm going to do is I am going to smudge out some of these overlaps. So I have the smudger number 6 and size 5. And I'm just going to gently smudge. Try to avoid going outside the edges. So usually what I'll do is I'll smudge inside like that. That way I avoid the outside. I like that. So now what I want to do is I want to add a little bit of shadow to this. And I'm going to do that with a clipping mask. So what I'm going to do is go to the layers panel, tap on plus, and make this a clipping mask. And I'm going to go to the color wheel and go to a much darker color. And then I'm going to add on a little bit on one side of this tree. Now, as you can see, that's not a very strong shadow. And the reason for this is that we have added a clipping mask on top of a layer that is transparent. So whenever you are using Procreate and you have a transparent layer, watercolor is transparent, and you add on a clipping mask, it will be transparent. So I want to show you if I remove the clipping mask, you see how much more intense that is. So the way around it is to make this bottom layer less transparent. And in order to do that, it's very simple. You just have to make a copy of that shape, turn it to white, and then add it to the shape, like merge it. And then what will happen is your shape will look exactly the same. It's just now more opaque. So let's do that together. Let's swipe on that shape, duplicate it, go to the bottom layer. And what we're going to do is we're going to turn this bottom layer into white. Right now you see the bottom layer showing everything has become much darker and it's losing that luminosity. So just go to adjustments panel, hue, saturation, brightness, and turn this white. Do you see our shape looks like what it did earlier? And now what we're going to do is we're just going to merge these two layers together. So our original shape at the top and then our white shape at the bottom. And then what you'll see is our clipping mask will show up a lot more. You see our clipping mask is now showing up a lot more intensely. So that's a little trick. So I'm just going to continue to add a little bit of, oh, I'm in the wrong layer. Oops. So make sure you're in the right layer. I'm going to go back to this clipping mask layer and knew something was off. And I'm just going to add a shadow to certain areas. Maybe a little bit here too. Maybe a little bit here. Towards the bottom of these branches. Because the light's hitting from the top, I would assume. And don't worry if it looks a little too much right now. We can always smudge it out. Okay, so I've added some shadow. I'm going to get to the smudger and just gently smudge it. I think that smudger is too small. There we go. So now I'm going to go to the layers panel, tap on plus, and do all of my details in one layer. You can definitely do them in different layers depending on the color of those details, but I like to do all my details in one layer. So I'm going to start off with the trunk. So I'm going to grab this color right here, and I'm going to go down at a diagonal. I always do this with my details. That way I'm getting a color that's going to have more contrast. So I'm just going to go down at a diagonal. So it becomes a little bit more saturated and a little bit darker. And what I'm going to do is for details, I have a bunch of detail brushes. You can choose whichever one you want. I'm going to go to basic detail A, and I'm just going to have a look. What does this look like? I like that. And with this brush, depending on how much pressure and tilt, you can get slightly different results. So just play around with it and use variable pressure. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add a little bit of a line on one side here and a broken line. I don't want it to be perfect. Again, I don't want this to look super perfect. Just to add a little bit of pop. And I'm going to vary my pressure when I'm doing that. So it just adds a little bit more visual interest. And you can even do this here. And you know what? I also want to add a few blades of grass. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab one of the colors from the tree, maybe this one, and just with very quick sweeping motions, just add a few blades of grass right there. You can add more if you'd like. I think that is good enough for me. Don't want to get carried away. And now you can also add some details at the top here if you want to. And this can make your tree pop a little bit more. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab this dark color here and make it a tad darker. Again, going down at a diagonal. And I may consider just adding little hints of details here and there. So you can stop here, but I feel like I can make this a little bit better. I find that there's not enough contrast between the trunk and the leaves. Let's see if I make the trunk a bit darker, does it look any better? Or if I make it a bit lighter. So sometimes when you want things to pop a bit more, it's all about kind of just changing how bright something is or how dark something is. So this is the layer where we had that tree trunk. Let's go to adjustments, hue, saturation, and brightness. And let's see if I make this a bit brighter. What do you think? Does that look nicer? I kind of like it. I feel like it pops more, right? Now if I make it darker, changes the vibe. No. This is where it was. Just a tad lighter, and automatically I feel like it pops a bit more. So sometimes that's all you need to do is just make a slight adjustment once you've done the painting. Now, the final step, which is totally optional, is to create sort of a darker, harder edge around the tree, and it will really make that tree pop. But you don't have to do this. You can leave things as is, but I'm going to show you how to do that. But before I do that, what I want to do is I want to take all of my layers here. I'm going to tap on that top layer and swipe to the right and select everything and group it all, and then tap right here, and now I have everything in a group. And what I'm going to do is I don't want to touch my original. I want to show you what I'm doing in a copy. So I'm going to swipe to the left, duplicate it. I'm going to turn off this original. When you're going to make a big change to something, it's always a good idea to duplicate your entire group. So what I'm going to do in order to make that hard edge around my entire painting, just to make it pop more, is I have to take this entire group, all of the layers, and flatten them so that it's one singular layer. And then what I want to do is select everything around my object, everything around my tree, and then kind of feather that selection so that it actually goes into the edges of my tree. and then we are going to use hue, saturation, brightness, and darken it. So that way what's going to happen is your edges will be a little bit darker. So if you've ever seen that in watercolor painting, usually you get very dark edges and it makes everything pop. So that's what we're trying to accomplish here. So let's go to the selection menu, tap on automatic, tap outside your tree, tap outside your object. Do you see it's selected everything outside? If that's not happening, then you may need to shift your pencil, put your pencil down on the screen and move it around a little bit until you get the correct selection threshold, which is up here. So this is good. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to tap in these areas too, because I do want to select those. I'm very careful with this. And I'm not going to select everything, but I'll try to select as much of that white area. We want to zoom in as I can. What I've done now is I have selected everything outside of the tree. Now, if you tap on feather, feather will kind of feather out that selection of yours. I'm going to go to 3%. So what it's going to do is I can't zoom in right now. It's going to start selecting a little bit of your object and then tap on adjustments. And I'm going to go to curves. I'm going to zoom in now so I can see what I'm doing. And what I find is if I go to the gamma section and I tap right here and I bring this down a notch, do you see that outer edge started to darken a little bit? Do you see that? It's a bit too dark if I bring that all the way down. If I drop it here, kind of like there, that works really well. So let me show you what I did again. So I tapped right here, so I create a blue node and I just bring it down. And it darkens that edge. And it just makes everything pop a little bit more. You don't want to go down too far though. Then you can just tap here and it will remove your selection. If you zoom in, it's such a subtle difference. You might not be able to see it on this screen, but when you do it on your iPad, you'll notice it just makes the painting pop. So let me just show you not side by side, but so this is what we did here. Let me turn that off. That was the original. So that was the original layers. And this is with that darker edge. It is subtle, but old, new. It just pops a little bit more, just a little bit more. So that's a little trick. So that is how you can create a tree with watercolor in Procreate. Now, one bonus tip that I wanted to mention is if you want to change up your tree. Let's say you painted the tree and you're like, well, I want to change it up a bit. So I'm going to turn this layer off. I'm going to go back to my original layers. And actually, let me duplicate that group. So remember I had that group. Let's duplicate it by swiping to the left and duplicate. Okay, let's turn that bottom layer off. So now let's open up the layers panel, and with this new group that we created right here, let's open it up. Oops, I closed it. Let's open it up and let's change this painting. So one thing you could do is to change the colors. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to merge all of these together. So they're all on one layer, all the clipping masks for the top of the tree. And then I'm going to go to hue, saturation, and brightness. I'm going to go to curves. I'm going to zoom out a little bit. And you can play around by moving the nodes. So you see, I can make this tree a little bit paler. I can make it more intense, but that doesn't look right. You can change the colors too. Go to the red and change the color. Do you see, just with one little movement, I was able to make this tree look like we're heading into fall. So that is kind of the beauty. You've done the painting once, and with one little shift, now we have something that looks like fall. Isn't that amazing? That is the beauty of digital watercolor. It is so hard to do this with traditional because you'd have to repaint it again, or you'd have to scan it into Photoshop and then change up the colors. So now it looks like fall. And I can also do one more thing, is this layer underneath where we have that shape in white, I can change that shape. So I can double tap here on white and go back to one of the shape makers. I'll go back to number 27. And let's say I want to change the shape a little bit and have fewer gaps. I could do that. Point is, I'm able to make changes at this point and make it look different, and I don't need to repaint everything. So that is it for today. There was a lot that we covered. We talked about clipping masks, we talked about selection tool, we talked about how to create hard edges, we talked about the shape maker method. So I hope that you can take the techniques that we discussed in this video and then apply it to your own paintings. You could apply this to flowers, you could apply this to animals. The techniques remain the same. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you learned something new, please do give it a thumbs up and leave a comment because that helps my channel grow. And if you're interested in the brush set, there are a lot more fun brushes in this set. There are 45 different brushes and you can do a variety of different paintings. And not only do you get watercolor brushes, you also get a few sketch brushes, erasers, smudgers. It's an all-in-one set. And I have brush tutorials for every single brush. So you're never left hanging thinking, how do I use this? I have a tutorial on it. So definitely check that out. And there are also a few splatter brushes too, if that's your thing. So anyway, thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next video. Bye.